In this video, we will talk about materials inside VRAY for SketchUp. So we're gonna start from the beginning. We're gonna start with really basic things, and then we're gonna increase the level in the later part. We're going to see how to create some standard materials and then some glasses and some metals. So we're gonna work with refraction and reflection. So the first thing we need is a subject that we can work on. In this case, I've chosen this table, cafe table, that you can find in the components here in SketchUp. So if you go here, you can find the cafe table in the dynamic components, but you can also search for other objects in the 3D warehouse from the component panels or from the 3D warehouse button right here. Okay, so you can just insert whatever you want to start working with materials. Also, I'm using the scene that we used in the previous videos with the lights, but I'm gonna hide the lights right now. And I will click this coffee table here and place it a copy. There you go. So the first thing we can check is the materials that are already applied to the object. So if I go into the VRAY asset editor, I can use this scene interaction tool right here, and I can click on a particular surface and find out which material has been used for that surface right there. So I'm gonna expand with this arrow on the right the editor, and this is the part concerning the materials. So you can see that this material here has a texture, and this one here at the bottom, it's a simple color. So you can divide materials into two main categories: the ones that uses only colors and parameters, and the ones that uses textures. Now the textures will give you a more realistic effect because it's using an image of an actual material like wood, for example, in this case. And so this is going to be more realistic than using a simple color and simple parameters. But we're going to start simple. We're going to start with simple parameters, and then we will move to textures later on. So to exit the scene interaction tool, I can click on the select arrow of SketchUp, and now I can select my component. So the first thing we can see here is when I have identified the material used in this subject right here, in this object, I can modify. So for example, I can modify the color, and this is really the simplest thing that you can do, is to assign a different color, and you can increase the quantity of color. You can also take off the color, and this is gonna become black. This is useful, for example, for metals when you don't need color. So the diffuse channel is the simplest channel and also the most important because it's the most superficial. So it's the first thing you're gonna look into a material. So you can consider a material to be the end result of a series of layers that are stacked one on top of the other. So the final result is gonna be your material. So for example here, this one is using only one channel, which is the diffuse channel. And then we can use also the reflection channel to create metallic looking materials or plastic or glossy materials. And then we have refractions for glasses and so on. But let's start with the first one. So you can select colors here. You can define the color using the RGB system or the hue and saturation and luminosity here, black and white. Okay, pretty simple. You can also save your materials in this bar. So you just need to right click when you have selected a particular material, right click on an empty slot, and you're gonna save those for later use. Okay, and this is the color, pretty simple. Now if we want to assign a texture, we will use this texture slot, but we're gonna talk about that later. Also, you may notice that when you open up the VRAY asset editor, you will find a lot of materials. This is because VRAY is automatically converting the materials that you have in objects that you have imported into your scene into VRAY materials. If you want to delete anything that is not used, you can use these purge unused assets. So every time you want to clean up everything that is not needed, you can use this tool here. So it's going to clean up all the materials that are not currently used into the scene, but also lights, proxies, and other VRAY elements. So be careful, because it's going to wipe out everything that is not used at the moment. And you will find here also in the extension VRAY tools and wipe VRAY data from project. If you want to focus on materials, you can click just the first icon right here. And again, if you want to find out where a material is applied, you can select that, right click, and say select objects in scene. And in this case, there is no object. So if I want to find out where this is used, say select objects in scene, you can see that it's used at the bottom of this table. Now, when you use a component, you cannot apply a material right away. So if I select, for example, here a new material, so let's create new one with this button at the bottom, materials, and create a new generic, which is going to be standard gray at the beginning. So if I want to apply this to a component, I can right click, say apply to selection, but nothing's going to happen. If I select this part of the scene in the background instead and say right click, apply to selection, you can see that it's been applied. Why is that? Because these are actual surface and this is not yet a group or a component. When you create a group or a component, you need to go inside the group or the component. So if I create a new one, and it's gonna be generic, and let's call this tabletop. Okay, now if I want to assign it to the tabletop, I need to double click, get inside the component, select that part of my object, and again double click, get inside, select all the surfaces like that, and then I can assign. Right click, apply to selection. So be careful, because you need to do this every time you need to apply some material to an object nested inside a component. Also, another really important thing is that you need to render out what you're doing to see if everything is going well. So you can check the preview here of the material, but in the end, you will always have to come back here and check if everything is going the way you wanted into the final render. So sometimes you need to render out your scene.